afternoon and welcome to our How to Set Up Your Team for Record Success in 2022 webinar. This is actually take 2 because when we did it live this morning, I unfortunately forgot to press the record button. But this means you're getting a bespoke one, specially designed for watching on catch-up. So, by way of welcome, I'm Helen Pethy-Bridge, MD of Action Coach Chilterns, and I come to you and bring this topic to you as a sort of combination of my experience to date. So I've spent, over nearly pretty much 25 years in corporate HR roles as a senior HR director across commercial for Europe for PepsiCo, but previously Diageo, GE, big multinational corporates. And then I have my entrepreneurial seizure. Look up the E-Myth book by Michael E. Gerber if you're not familiar with that phrase. And started my own business with an Action Coach franchise here in High Wycombe. So the last 6 years I've been doing this, coaching and mentoring local SME business owners. And what I've really noticed in that last 6 years, bringing forward kind of my knowledge from my previous 25 years, is that having your team fully engaged and fully effective is the biggest unlock to business growth. We can have all the wonderful strategies we want, but without a great team in place to execute them with you, you're going to be limited in your growth. And so that's where I really do specialize now, is in that team effectiveness to enable growth. And then we can move on to all the other fun and interesting strategies, but only once you've got the right team in place. And setting up the new year is such a good opportunity to get that going. So without further ado, we're going to jump on in here. Make sure you've got pen and paper because we don't send the slides out and it's the best way of learning. So if you want to retain this, write it down. So to begin with, let's teach you a little bit about how learning works. So yes, you've got to write it down. Also, think about how our brains work. So I'm sure many of you have heard the phrases left brain and right brain, but most people get confused as to which is which. So I'm actually on the more logical side. My logical brain, I'm sure, is bigger than my creative one. And hence I remember it that left and logical both begin with an L. So now you'll be able to remember it. So the left-hand side of our brain is the data side, the numeric side, the very logical side. The right-hand side is our language, emotions, the more creative side, artistic, visual side. So that's interesting to know, but it's even more interesting to know when we actually pair it up with where does our memory sit. So our long-term memory sits in our right-hand brain and the short-term memory in our left logical brain. So what that means is I'm essentially going to be giving you lots of great input on creating your effective team for 2022 in a logical way, but actually we want you to be able to remember this by Monday and not forget it over the weekend. So we've got to move it from your left logical brain over into your right creative brain. So that's why we want coloured pens. I want you writing notes, make them as creative as possible, bullet points, arrows, colours, squiggles around it. However visual you can make them, it will really help your learning. As does thinking, calling out answers. Shout it out to yourself if you're watching this on catch up. But really participate as much as you can. Really think through the topics we're talking about. Think what your answers would have been if you'd been watching this live, so that you're embedding that learning in your brain. So when I asked what people were wanting to get out of this webinar, we had all sorts of things coming through, lots of expectations, which is great, many of which we are going to cover. So what do you want to get out of listening to this webinar? Just think now and write it down for you. Because when you are conscious about what you want to get out of a learning event, you're going to be looking for those bits of information. You're going to stand a much better chance of having that outcome. But when we look at some of the things that we've put in here, absolutely, we're going to look at the characteristics of high performance and high performing teams. Actually, we talk a bit about difficult conversations. We're going to look at engagement. In fact, we're going to cover the top 6 drivers of engagement. So that's definitely going to meet these needs. We're going to look at how to motivate people, and how to make sure we have got the quality and the output. So think for you. I hope by now you've written down a couple of thoughts. These slides might prompt you as well in terms of what you'd like to get out of the next hour or so of watching this video. So back to our learning agenda. What else do we need to know about learning? Now, we all, I think, can safely say at one stage or another in our lives have been teenagers, and many of you might indeed have teenagers currently in your family. If you have had this experience, as I most of us did experience being a teenager however many years back, you will be familiar with the phrase, "I know," with the eye roll. At which point, when you're trying to impart some wonderful piece of wisdom, or indeed your parents were to you, "Oh, I know," we say that, don't we? And what happens is, as we say that, our ears sort of shut down, our eyes, and we don't take in any more information. It's like we're going, "I know, I don't need anything else," and we close down, and we're not open to learning, we're not open to thinking, and we carry on. And I know they actually simply can't. I say, "Oh, dinner's ready." "Oh, no." "Oh, no, you never told me that." "Yes, I did. You just didn't take it in." Now, we don't want to do that this morning whilst you're doing your learning here. So we're going to cover some topics you will undoubtedly have heard before, because you know what? Managing a team isn't rocket science and it isn't new. So I am definitely going to cover things that you're going to go, "Oh, I know about that." What I want you, instead of thinking, "I know," I want you to think, "Oh, I wonder what's interesting. What different point of view is Helen going to have?" Because when you have that curiosity and think, "Well, that could be interesting," you're then going to listen with an open mind instead of closing everything down. So that's my urging, to get the most out today is think, "Oh, that could be interesting," rather than, "I know." Is that a deal? So keep an open mind and you will get lots from this session. So I want to start, as ever, with my favourite formula that we use in Action Coach, which is be times do equals have. So yes, it's a word formula, but that makes it, for my mind, even more powerful. So what do we mean by this? What this is saying is that in order to get what we want to have, what we end up having is a combination, it's a product, that's our product symbol, the multiplication, of who we're being and what we're doing. The more consciously we're being and the more productive doing we're doing, by the time you multiply those together, it's going to absolutely create more of what you have. Equally, when we go backwards, the more if you haven't got what you want to have, then look backwards and see, are you doing everything you need to be doing? And are you being the person you need to be to have what you want to have? And if you haven't got what you want to have, is it more doing or more being that you need to do? So we can look at this individually, but we can also look at it from a team point of view. So we're in teams today, getting our team off to a great start this year. So I'd suggest you look at this in terms of the being for the team is how engaged are the team? That's their being, if you like, collectively. And do they know what they're meant to be doing? Have they got a real clear direction on what's expected of them and what do they need to do this year? So the more engaged they are and the clearer they are on what they need to do, the more you're going to end up having. So I hope you've written that down by now. Be times do equals have. And just think of that. And also these kind of equations that I share work just as well at home as they do in the office. So you might have some other uses for this as well. So we started off by asking, have you, and you now write down the answer for you. It's very simple. It's a yes or a no. Have you, at this point in time, taken the time to review 2021 with your team? Have you sat down and sort of considered how it went, the highs, the lows, etc.? And what we found this morning was 64% of people had, which is great, but over a third hadn't. And that's a real lost opportunity. So it's not too late. If you haven't sat down and reviewed last year, Because you know what? A lot of us don't want to be repeating last year again this year. 2021 was fine. We finished it. We've shut the door and we're moving forward. So if you want a different 2022 to 2021, I highly recommend you look back, review it, and take the learnings from it and move forwards. Now, if you're in the 36% of the no camp, my next slide is going to help you structure that. If you're in the 64%, yes, you've already done your review, great. Give yourself a pat on the back and have a look at this next slide, because that might help you for your next review, either end of next year or even, heaven forbid, a quarterly review or a 6-monthly review. So I want to introduce you to our Lion review. We can use this for weekly team meeting, but it's also a very good structure for reviewing the last year. So we want to first off look at last year's performance from a numbers, a data perspective. What was the revenue? What was your profit? You may or may not want to share profit with the team, but certainly revenues. What were the other numbers, the key numbers? Customers won, customers lost, average spends, whatever the numbers are for your business. What does it look like? Maybe there's Google ratings, so customer satisfaction scores. You might have employee satisfaction scores. Let's look at all the data you've got that tells you how last year went. Also have a look at some of the big projects that you were focused on last year. What happened to those? How did those go? So when you've reviewed your data, then have a look at, as you look through that, what issues were there last year? Capture the issues that you and the team spotted last year, because those are ones you want to decide, are they going to happen again? And how can you mitigate them? How can we deal with them? If they were completely one-off because that was the year that was, then just move on from them. But a lot of the things that happen, you know, issues often have the opportunity to appear again. So let's deal with issues once we've identified them. Then we want to look forwards and go, okay, in 2022, given what we did last year, given what we know about this year, what are some new opportunities we might want to take? Is there anything we did last year that we could amplify this year? Anything we could do differently? Do we start inching towards a niche we could really expand in? Maybe some different sales and marketing strategies that were starting to work you want to really magnify. And then finally, look at what are the big, I would suggest 3. We had a great question. Does it have to be 3? What's special about 3? Nothing hugely special about 3, but focused, 3 to 5 maybe. Big topics that are your big, hairy, audacious goals, if you like, for 2022. What are the big things you want to achieve as a business, as a team all together? And get those defined, because that starts to provide the clarity that your team are going to need, so they know what activity what's the doing they need to be doing. Okay, so if you haven't already, please make a note. Might be your first action is to book in a Lion meeting to review the last year if you haven't already. So when we've done our review, we can then start the process of creating clarity for this year. And I, time and time again, come back to one of Stephen Covey's habits. So he's the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those is begin with the end in mind. And I think it's probably my favorite. So what do we mean by that? That means get clear on where you're aiming to get to before you even start. If we don't think about where we want to get to, there's absolutely no way you're going to get there. Because how could you? Because you haven't thought that that's where you want to go. The other reason for thinking about where we want to get to is so that we can plan. So there's some levels to do this. So I consider these 3 timeframes essentially, 3 types of plans and clarity essential for any business. The first one is your strategic plan. This is typically 3 to 5 years out. Where do you want to be on that horizon? 3 to 5 years out, what kind of business do you want to be running? What kind of scale? What kind of products and services you're offering? Where are you going to be? What's the team? You know, just what does that look like? What's the scale of ambition that you've got for your business? One of the things we're very good at is underestimating what we can achieve in the long term. If you even think back now, where were you 5 years ago, 10 years ago? you've probably come on leaps and bounds further than you thought. What if you'd actually planned? Then you could have achieved so much more even. The second level of plan is the 12-month operational plan. So that's taking, okay, I'm 5 years out, I want to get here. Where do I need to get to in that first year to set me on that route? And it's far more detailed. You're going to have a financial plan behind that, a sales and marketing plan in terms of what are the key milestones and stepping stones you're going to need to deliver in the next 12 months, i.e. in 2022, that is going to be your year one of your 5-year strategy. And then the third level is having an activity level plan. What are the activities I'm going to do that will deliver the strategies in the operational plan, which delivers the ambition in the strategic plan? Now, I highly recommend planning your activity level plan in 3-month chunks. It's long enough to spend some time planning it out, but short enough that when you need to course correct, you can adapt within that. So what have you already got in place? So just write this down in your notebooks. Do you have a strategic plan, a 3 to 5 year plan? Now, by the way, if you go, yeah, I created one of those 3 years ago, then it isn't a 3-year plan because you've had those 3 years. So have you got a strategic plan? Tick or cross. Have you got a 12-month operating plan? What you're going to do this year and the financials and the marketing and sales plans alongside that? Tick or cross. And are you working to a 90-day activity plan that's going to make sure you get all those little bits in place that are going to ladder up to achieving that operational plan? Now, when we did this in the live session, we had, out of our 37 votes there, 26, so a good proportion got a 90-day activity plan, but then it kind of dropped down so that we were at, less than half, significantly less than half, have got a 5-year strategic plan. Just over half have got the 12-month operational plan. So still quite a bit of opportunity there to get some more planning in place. Because if you, the business owner or the leader of that part of the organization, I know we've got some corporate leaders here as well as some SME owners, but the patch of business that you look after, if you're not clear on where it's going in 12 months, and what needs to be achieved in 12 months, how are the team going to be? So in this case, more than a third of the leaders of the teams are not clear. So there's no way the teams are going to be. We can't have clarity on the doing, be, do equals have. We can't be clarity about what we're doing if we don't have, even if we haven't even spent the time to work the plan. So you might have just picked up a little bit more work that you need to add to your to-do list. So when we've set that ambition, the next thing we need to do is to cascade that clarity through our organization. So it starts with those business objectives, maybe those top 3 to 5 must-dos for your business for the year. Then depending on the size of your organization, this could break down into team objectives. So that's the whole business has to do those 3 or 5. What that means for each team. It might be region by region by region, geographical region. What's the contribution your team needs to make? It might be functionally. What does the sales team need to do? What does the operations team need to do? What does the admin function need to do in order to deliver those big objectives? But they need to be defined and all aligned so that they are going to join up to achieving the business objective. And then when we're clear on the team objectives, then each individual within that team needs to understand what's their role in achieving the team objective. And this is something that is especially well done if you do it in an engaging, interactive way with the team. So they self-determine and come to the conclusion of what needs to happen, because then they've got a lot more ownership of it. So we get to the point where they can see that my particular role is required to deliver XYZ. These are my personal objectives, which enable our team to achieve, which enables the business to achieve. And when that's all in place, then we have a far, far stronger chance of achieving results. Now, setting the objectives is one thing, and I would say is done reasonably well. And I think that we've got the Menti here, yes. So when we asked, and think this for yourselves, how confident are you that your team understand how they contribute to the overall business performance? So our audience this morning, most people felt the most common response was they were somewhat confident, not totally confident, but somewhat confident. The next most expressed feeling was very confident, and the fewest people were very doubtful. So this is good, that there's overall a somewhat to very confident feeling about the team understanding how they contribute, which is great because we need that first off. But the next thing that has to happen is you might know what your role is and how you're meant to contribute, but is it actually happening? It's one of the business puzzles of my career, really. Throughout my time in corporate, I don't think we absolutely set objectives. That was a big corporate process. What there wasn't, though, was the big corporate process to actually plan how you were going to deliver those objectives. It was just left to happen. So I would urge you, once you've designed what the objectives are, is to then plan how that's going to happen. Exactly what is going to happen when, by whom, for that objective to be met. So that's a key part. And if you want any help on that, I've done a lot of work there, both in SMEs and now in corporates, to put back the planning of achieving the objectives. So we've planned this, and now we need to make sure, have we got the right work lined up to be done by the right people? Sounds a bit obvious, but actually maybe isn't quite so much. So what I'm suggesting here is that each year, at least, you need to look at your team and go, have I got the right people in the right roles doing the right things to achieve the business objective? Because the chances are last year's objectives were different to this year's, and yet we're setting off with the same people in the same roles and expecting a different result. That doesn't make logical sense. So start by looking at what needs to change. Now, the focus of the role, so it can be the same person in the same job, but they might have a slightly different focus because that's aligned and defined in the objectives. That's almost a given. It's going to happen year on year. There's going to be a slight tweak in focus of the roles aligned to the business objectives and direction. That's quite easy to do, and we fixed it by giving objectives and making sure people understand them. The next level is to look at, actually, is it more fundamental than that? It's not just a change in focus, the actual job has changed. Maybe you were doing, all your sales as face-to-face sales in person. Pandemic's come along, you switched into Zoom mode. So it's still face-to-face, similar skills. I would say that would have been a focus change. We've got to maybe build some Zoom skills rather than how to navigate and find people face-to-face. But it's still fundamentally the same. But maybe this year you've gone, actually, we're going to go to a whole different online marketing strategy where it's not the face-to-face, whether it's in person or remote, it's a much more online experience. In which case that job description could be completely different. Maybe it's about learning about automated emails and how to use LinkedIn more effectively. And it's a completely different skill set to meeting for a coffee and looking to build business that way. So we have to look, do we need to actually rewrite the job or half the job? Given your new focus for the new business objectives, do you actually need some different jobs? Actually, you didn't have one of those before, and you now do need that particular focus and activity happening, which is a completely new job. Maybe there's something that you don't need at all and that's removed. So just look at the structure of the team. Have you got the work in jobs? Is that the correct work that needs to be done? Because you might need to change some job descriptions and do that in the right way with your HR support. And then final level to think about here is, do the people need to change? If we change the job description, the chances are at a minimum they're going to need to develop some different skills. Have we got new technologies coming in on board, new methods that they're going to have to learn? And in some cases, it might be everything has changed so much that you're now left with a round peg in a square hole, and actually we need to change the person. Maybe there's a different role they can move into, or maybe it is a replacement that we need. So rather than just assume we're doing a carryover, just take some time to think about, given what the business requirements are to achieve this year, what does the team need to look like? Where's the focus changes? Has the role changes, the skills and the people? And be conscious, because that's really the first step in making sure your team is set up for success, is that you've got the right people in the right role. So as you think about that, we also want to make sure that the outcome of all of this is that you've got each of your team members really playing to their strengths. It's so important. It's a big part of engagement. We'll see that actually as we wrap up at the end, that people are able to do what they do best for most of their time. There's two really logical reasons why you should play people to their strengths. One is we all enjoy doing the work that we do best, so they're going to have a more enjoyable time at work. And secondly, because that's what they do best, they're going to be so much more productive. So both is a win-win. So really consider, have you got people doing what they do best in those roles for the most of the time? So we put this out on our Menti to see how people were finding things. And the sense was that most people, the most popular choice was that they felt they've got 50 to 75% of their team playing to their strengths for the majority of the time, which actually feels quite good on the surface. But if it's 50%, that means we've also got 50% of the team not playing to their strengths most of the time. So if you're nearer the 50% end, that tells me there's quite a bit of opportunity there to look at, can you help more people play to their strengths for more of their working time? Because that's going to be more enjoyable for them and more productive for you. So I do urge you to look at this question of where people are playing to in their strengths. So we've now got clarity on what we're doing. People are playing to their strengths. Now we want to make sure we're sort of edging a bit into the being side of here. Are they equipped for success? Have they got everything they need to be successful in achieving those business objectives with you? And there's a whole raft of ideas I put in here, and this is not an exclusive list by any manner of means. But on the learning side, very much the being side, do they need to build some new skills? Do they need to gain some different knowledge? Are they supporting maybe a different market? Do they need more confidence? Maybe it's a slightly different area and actually they need to rebuild confidence here. There might be some physical things that need to change. Actually, if they've got the proper equipment that they need. Is anything got broken? Have you got people doing crazy workarounds because they've just made do, but it's actually time and cost ineffective to do that? Do we need to update software or get some new apps that are going to help them be more productive? Is there more qualifications that they need if you're going in a certain direction? So have a good think around the whole breadth of being what they might need to be able to give their best to the team. And a lot of these things don't need to be expensive. You know, equipment, great secondhand provision of almost everything that can look pretty new. Different ways of learning, self-learning videos, loads of books, and even secondhand. I get almost loads of my books, so almost new. Great way of buying books. So we don't have to be too constrained by cost here, because there's usually a solution that is pretty affordable. So we've got them set up, they've got the equipment they need, they know where they're going. This is great, we're up and running, we've set off for the year. But before we celebrate, give ourselves a big pat on the back, we need to make sure we're keeping track of progress, because setting off is great, but actually we need to keep on track during the year if we're actually going to have that success at the end of the year. So I've got 5 areas here I want you to think about how you're going to monitor this during the year. If you think about it now, you'll be able to do that monitoring during the year. First one here is thinking about what's happening on an activity basis versus what outcome is being created. Now, job descriptions and objectives can sometimes be a bit overly activity focused, as in what the team member needs to be doing. So we need to be, again, I'm going to continue on my little sales example. They need to be, out there networking, or they need to be producing 10 new leads a month, whatever it is they've got to do. That's activity. Versus the outcome is, what were we expecting to get from that activity, and is that outcome happening? So in a sales example, the outcome would be business won, contract signed, even revenue. So you can definitely get situations where there's lots of activity going on. It's even the right activity, as in it's what we asked them to do, but it's not producing the outcome we assumed it was going to produce and that our plans are based on. So we need to be tracking both of those, because if we're getting the activity done, but we're not getting the outcome, then we need to change the activity. We need to review and understand, why is it that when we thought that activity was going to lead to this outcome, it isn't. So really important, because if we're tracking just activity, you're going to get to the end of the year and you've missed plan, you've missed the opportunity to course correct as you go along. Next area is understanding and tracking the progress of the team effort and outcomes versus the individual. So this can work both ways, actually. We can have a team that is on track, but when we look at the individuals that make up that team, there's 1 or 2 who are not on track and others who are on or above track. And we need to recognize that, because the team will know. They know. I don't know why there's a constant underestimating of the awareness of team members of what is going on in the team, and they are the closest to it, always far smarter and on the money than the manager is, in my experience. So if you think you've spotted something, you can be guaranteed the rest of the team have. So don't brush it under the carpet. That will lose you credibility. We need to face into it. So if the team have met objectives or met progress or met the milestone at the end of the first quarter, great, celebrate. But if some of those individuals are behind or haven't contributed as fully as others, we need to address that and help them up their game. And we also need to recognize those who've gone above and beyond. So we can spot individuals who have gone and achieved their activity and outcomes, but the team overall hasn't. So that's why it's important, because we need to recognize what's happening for people when they're achieving, when they're not. So separating out and monitoring team and individual performance is absolutely key. Third area, which we've almost touched upon there, is by definition of doing that, is you're going to see where are the successes and where is improvement needed. And we want to be looking at that and altering, fixing for that, celebrating the successes, fixing and looking at how to improve as we go along. But you won't know that unless you've done the first 2, activity versus outcome and team versus individual. Then you can make sure that we've got those right actions happening. Fourthly, check that you're tracking progress in different timeframes. So I'm sure you all do this annually, but not least you're going to have to submit an annual return or write up an annual appraisal. But that's really not enough. So how can you do this quarterly, monthly, weekly, depending on the business? I'd say monthly at a minimum for any business. If you're a fast-moving consumer goods, fast-moving retail, then you might want to be doing this weekly. So what are you going to track? How frequently? What's weekly? What's quarterly? Annually? And how are you going to do that? And make sure it's numerically based, because there's data there that isn't debatable. And finally, when you've got all this information, just make sure you do something with it. course correct as required. If we set the objectives and we've got the plans in place, that's our best thinking at the beginning of the year when we started off. If actually the activities are not proving to deliver the outcome, we need to course correct and find some different activities that we believe are going to serve us better. Sometimes the situation changes. My goodness, this has happened in the last 2 years where actually the objectives that we did set were no longer relevant and we have to reset because the environment has changed. So don't be so wedded to a plan that you don't recognize when it's not serving you anymore. And there's a balance to be had, isn't there, between giving yourself an excuse, oh, I haven't done it, so it's not relevant. Well, no, that's cheating, versus when actually genuinely the situation has changed and it's not appropriate anymore. So as you think of those 5 factors and dimensions of tracking progress, have a think about which is the one you maybe need to focus more on. Which one needs a bit more attention from you for you and your team and your business? Now, when we looked at this earlier on Menti, the feedback we got from our delegates was that actually the one that needed most additional focus was looking at activity versus outcome, which is interesting, and then into the successes and improvements. Seemed like people were pretty onto their course correcting. I think we've all got quite good at that. So yeah, see what it is for you. And again, write down an action. What do you need to do? And how are you going to do this? How are you actually going to look at activity versus outcome? What does that mean for you in your organization? So as we move on here, I'm now going to tell you rather confusingly, in order to manage your team successfully through the year, I don't want you to be nice. We're not being nice anymore. Okay, what do you mean by that? So nice for me stands for nothing inside me cares enough. What does that really mean? What are you saying there, Helen? What I'm saying is when we're nice, it's when we think, I'm not sure about that performance, maybe. Oh, I could, we could do better at this, but I don't want to upset them. I'll just be nice. Don't want to upset the apple cart. I'll be nice. And actually, you know what? It's not being nice. It's not helping them. It's not helpful. It doesn't help them move forward. It doesn't help the business achieve its goals. So when we really care about the results and we really care about the people, we give them all the help we can, which means giving them all the feedback that is helpful to them, developmental and positive. So just watch out if you hear yourself letting things go because you think it's a nice thing to do. Is it being nice, or is it just not facing into something? And actually, you'll have noticed at the beginning there, one of the outcomes somebody's looking for was actually having those more difficult conversations. And we had a really good debate in terms of actually the easiest way to handle a difficult conversation is to not let it get to a difficult point. Sounds obvious, but it's easier said than done. It's always easier to have a conversation right at the early stage, nip it in the bud before it's got to be a big thing for either you, the manager, or the team member. If as soon as there's a, it doesn't feel quite right, you're going, not sure about this, that's a much easier conversation than sitting down 3 months later going, I'm really unhappy with the brrr, when you did all of this stuff, when you could have done a little course correct right at the beginning. So having those little conversations and facing into them rather than being nice and sitting back is the best way to actually avoid the need to have difficult conversations, because difficult conversations are difficult. That's what it says on the tin. So we just need to avoid getting in them, not by avoiding having them, but because we've dealt with it earlier on. So finally, we've got to this stage, we've set the team up for success. They knew what they needed to be doing. They've been motivated to do that, have everything they need in order to succeed with the equipment and the learning and everything else. Now we're ready to celebrate. Now, my clients will know, because we review progress every quarter, and the thing I pick them up on nearly every quarter as well is, have you celebrated these fabulous wins? And the answer generally is, no, too busy getting on to the next thing. It's really important to take a moment and to celebrate. Celebrate with the team when celebration is due, and celebrate nice and near to when it happens, so it's really associated. So in our last Mentee, we had a share of what things are people doing to celebrate. And we've got some great ideas here, ranging from the minimal, no cost, to having a bell to, we've got a bell here actually, having a bell to ring at a certain point where you made a winning sale or something. Food features quite highly, cakes, lunches out, pizzas for the team, quite inexpensive. Scratch cards, I hadn't seen that one before, that's a great one. To the more exotic overseas trips at Christmas for obviously fantastic results there. Profit share can be one. The one with profit share, I just check that's one of a series of celebrations, because profit share tends to come at the end of a financial year. So it's difficult to celebrate a project that was great in Q1 if you're not going to see it in your pay packet till January the year after. So that's why you want little things to keep people going, because that's such a good motivator. Hot tub at the weekend, Prosecco and biscuits, strange combination. Dinners, so lots of food going on here. What other ideas have we got here? Oh, more bells. Sharing the news. How often do we actually forget to tell people great things? So make a point that you share these great things. Different softwares we've got, flowers, gifts, personal handwritten notes could be so effective. You know, celebrations work best when they're meaningful and personal, and people know that you've really put some thought into that. The more thought, the more appreciative that is. So thank yous, here we go. Personally and publicly saying thank you goes a million miles. So yeah, have you got some ideas here? Do you celebrate enough? Has something happened even in January so far that you could celebrate? So have a think. When do you, can you imagine even better as you're planning, plan what you could celebrate and when? And as long as you achieve it, it's going to happen. There's no risk of forgetting it. I hope that's given you some ideas. So as we start to wrap up here, what I thought I'd do is connect what we've covered today with the drivers of engagement as defined by Gallup. So they're called the Gallup 12, and we're looking at the top 6 in the interest of time. So Gallup as an organisation have done some very, very extensive research in terms of what are the questions to ask employees which really indicate their level of engagement. What needs to be in place for an employee to be fully engaged? If you want to learn more on that topic, there's a fabulous book called First Break All the Rules from Gallup, so easily available. Really great, it tells you the research and goes into more detail. But I want to give you a quick snippet here. So these are in order of importance. So of the 12 questions, the question that is most important for people to be able to answer yes to is, do you know what is expected of you at work? Do I, as an employee, know what you want me to be doing? What is expected of me in terms of what I'm doing and what standard is needed? Number one thing. So, which is what breaks my heart when so many places, they don't have clear job descriptions or position contracts or objectives. How on earth does somebody know what they're meant to be doing? They can't possibly answer the first question of engagement. So that's why we've talked about having clarity of direction and that cascade of objectives, so they know what they're meant to be doing and how it fits in to the organisation above them. Second question, have you got the materials and equipment to do your work right? So are you equipped for success? That's our bubble chart. are the more physical, practical side of that bubble chart. So have you got the materials and equipment to do your work right? So I know what I'm meant to be doing, and I've actually got the kit to do it. Hooray. First two ones are ticked. Third one. This is interesting. Third most important thing. At work, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? This is the discussion about, have you got your team playing to their strengths? Because it's every word in this question is thoroughly researched. So it's important that they have the opportunity to do what they do best every day. So it's not that little bit of the job that happens once a week, or that bit of the job that happens in quarter one and then the rest of it is dealt with. Every day, can they do what they do best? Oops, sorry. Then we have another interesting time one. So we talked about celebration, but look at this. Question number 4. In the last 7 days, have you received recognition or praise for doing good work? So are you once a week giving all of your team recognition or praise for doing good work? That's quite a high frequency to find something, and they will be doing it, but you've got to be open-eyed and open-eared to spot that and recognize them for it. So jot it down if you're spotting some of these and you're going, oh yeah, I do celebrate, but no, there's nothing every 7 days. Now, it's not that you need a weekend away every 7 days, but there's some feedback, there's a comment, that's great, loved how you did this. There's some recognition happening every 7 days. Number 5, does your supervisor or someone else at work seem to care about you as a person? Are they genuinely interested in your well-being and how you are? So this is where don't be nice plays in. And of the top 6, number 6 there, is there someone who encourages your development? And this is the other half of that equipped for success bubble chart we covered earlier. What do you need to know? What knowledge do you need to build? What skills do you need to improve in terms of the ongoing development for every employee? So it's been a quick trip through, but I hope you've got some good notes there and some actions that you need to do to make sure your team really is set up for success in 2022. So as we go right back to the beginning, be times do equals have. This is the B part. This is how are we making sure they are fully engaged, and have they got the clarity in terms of what they need to be doing, because that will enable you to have the results for your business that you want to have. So it might be for you that I haven't covered one of the hot topics for you on your team. We only had a certain amount of time, and lots and lots of questions and ideas came up at the beginning. So if we haven't covered it, I'd be more than happy to jump on a Zoom with you. So in fact, Simon and my team will be reaching out to everybody who booked for this to offer and give you my Calendly link. So if you want to book in a half an hour Zoom chat with me, we can cover that off separately. It's pro bono, complimentary, free of charge, just for me to help you on those particular points for a half-hour chat. And then separately, this coming Friday, the 4th of February, we've got our team masterclass. So this is where we're going to be doing an in-person full-day session, actually at Bisham Abbey near Marlow in Buckinghamshire. And we're going to cover all the 7 keys to creating a winning team with some of the focuses you can see here. So investment, just £150 plus VAT for the full day, including your breakfast and lunch. How's that? So if you'd like to do that, again, let Simon know. We'll be putting it in the email we send out to you, or just keep an eye on our LinkedIn. There'll be more information there, or just reach out to any member of the team. So in between whiles, please do review your notes. This is only good use of your time if you choose to take action on the back of it. So I'm sure each of you has got at least one action that could make your team even stronger in 2022. So work out what that thing is and exactly what you're going to do to take action. And I'd love to hear how it goes. So thank you for listening and have a brilliant 2022. Take care.